The Coen brothers' film No Country for Old Men is one of the most difficult movies to truly grasp. But in reality, the story itself is quite simple. We have three main characters: Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, a man who's lost his understanding of the world around him; Llewellyn Moss, an unlucky man with a stroke of luck who finds a suitcase filled with $2 million; and Anton Chigurh, a hired killer, a man who sees himself as something greater, almost godlike. There's a huge gap in time within this film's structure. The sheriff tries to catch up, but he's always too late. Moss arrives just in time, but only when it benefits him. Chigur, however, exists completely outside of time. He doesn't even wear a watch. And remember, the story takes place in the 1980s. Bell wears a wristwatch. Moss keeps his in his pants pocket. The sheriff's deputy, the cartel boss, Carla, Moss's wife, her mother, even the gas station owner, and that kind old lady. Every single one of them wears a watch. But Chigur doesn't need one. The Coen brothers paid incredible attention to detail. They built a world that feels real and deliberately led the audience astray. Every scene with the sheriff comes with a delay. He's always one step behind. Moss drives the current line of events, but Chigur breaks the balance entirely. At the very beginning of the film, Chigur is arrested on the side of the road, which means he was already heading toward the town, having received an assignment to find the missing money. Money that at that moment wasn't even missing yet. As you watch the film, dozens of questions start to form in your mind. And they're the right questions. Why did Anton let the officer arrest him in the first place? Why did Moss return to the crime scene when he clearly knew that the guy was already dead? Carson sees the suitcase full of money, yet he doesn't take it. How did Chigur realize that people were after him? How did he even know about the motel where Carson was staying? And the biggest question of all, where is Moss now?
I know where you are. You're in the hospital across the river, but that's not where I'm going.
The sheriff arrives at the crime scene. We see Chigur hiding behind the door. But when Bell finally enters the room, it's empty. Did Anton kill Carla? And if he did, then how? He doesn't have a weapon with him. Yet on the porch, he checks the soles of his boots, making sure there's no blood on them. All of these ambiguities in No Country for Old Men were intentional. The Coen brothers built them that way. Most of the key events, the ones that actually give us answers, happen off-screen. The three main characters almost never share the same moment in time. They never truly meet face to face. Because of that, Chigur feels like the Reaper himself, a force of death that moves by its own principles. Everyone who crosses his path ends up dead. Only a rare few, the lucky ones, manage to survive. But to really understand everything, to grasp Chigurh's motives, we have to turn to Cormac McCarthy's novel. That's the source of it all. Or we can take another path, erase every storyline in the movie where Chigur isn't present. Either way, both methods bring us closer to the truth. But even then, one mystery remains. The most important scene of all, Anton's disappearance from the motel room. And that's exactly where I want to begin my breakdown. When the sheriff meets with his colleague, he learns that they never managed to find the money.
No money in his room there? Couple hundred.
The police assume the money was taken by the Mexicans who killed Moss. During the conversation, Bell realizes that Chigur will definitely return to the crime scene to check everything himself. That thought becomes even clearer after what his colleague says.
Strolled right back into a crime scene. Now who'd do such a thing?
That's exactly why the sheriff comes to the motel. When Bell approaches the door, he sees that the lock has been blown out. The same thing he saw earlier at Moss's house. We're shown that Chigur is hiding in the corner behind the door. But when the sheriff steps inside and checks the room, he finds nothing. Only a coin and an open air vent. So what really happened in this scene? After all, this is the most important part of the entire film. Practically everything that came before was building up to this moment. So now let's go back to the beginning and take a closer look. In the opening minutes of the film, we hear a monologue. Old stories that reveal Bell's longing for the past, for those times when sheriffs didn't have to carry a gun.
Some of the old-time sheriffs never even wore a gun.
Throughout the entire film, his gun stays in its holster. Even when they arrive at Moss's house, he mentions this to his deputy.
You going in?
Gun out and up.
What about yours?
I'm hiding behind you.
He doesn't hide his fear. If you read the novel, you also learn that Ed Tom Bell is a coward, too smart and too old to die just a step away from retirement. The film shows this as well. Bell does everything he can to avoid getting involved in the investigation, even refusing to meet with the drug enforcement agents.
Rangers and the DEA are headed back out to the scene this morning. You gonna join them?
Any new bodies accumulate out there?
No, sir.
Well, then I guess I can skip it.
You can notice how nervous he is. Just look at his hands. Bell doesn't hide the truth. He's deeply shaken by what he witnessed during the shootout and its aftermath.
He's seen the same things I've seen, and it certainly made an impression on me.
He openly says that he will avoid getting involved in this case for as long as possible.
That DEA agent called again. You don't want to talk to him?
Gonna try to keep from it much as I can.
That's why Bell's decision to go to the crime scene and check the room himself is almost a feat. He's so terrified that for the first time in a long while, he actually draws his gun from the holster. In his mind, he imagines that death itself, in the form of Anton Chigurh, is waiting behind the door. You might think this is just fear, that Chigur behind the door is a product of the sheriff's imagination. But there are 3 details that are hard to explain. First, you can see that the locks in both rooms, 114 and 112, have been blown out. Second, when Bell opens the door, on the wall opposite him, you can notice the shadow of 2 tape strips. The yellow police tape used to cordon off the crime scene. When he steps out of the bathroom, the shadow disappears. But in the next shot, the shadow of the 2 strips reappears above Bell's head. And third, why did Chigur leave the coin? It's almost like a message for the sheriff. So what really happened in that room? We know that Chigur plans everything meticulously to avoid unnecessary consequences. Before entering the room where Llewellyn Moss is supposedly hiding, he runs through a mental rehearsal. He considers how he will enter, where the light switch is, even checks the thickness of the walls to make sure there's no metal layer his shotgun can't penetrate. He builds a full action plan in his mind, down to every detail. That's exactly what he did this time. Before stepping into room 114, he blew the lock on 112. He quickly went inside, unscrewed the vents with a coin, took the money, and then moved to room 112. There, he could calmly, without rush, examine the contents of the suitcase. Chigur knew that the sheriff would inevitably check the crime scene. Because Ed Tom Bell is smart, Anton would have acted the same way if he were in Bell's shoes. He also understood that there was no need to kill Ed Tom. That's why he left the coin. That coin decided the sheriff's fate. The will of the coin and Chigurh's own will aligned. And so he left it on the floor. A message for the sheriff. When Bell arrives at the motel, we see 2 doors. He has a choice of which one to open. At that moment, he doesn't realize who is truly putting their life on the line. As the sheriff prepares to enter and looks through the hole where the lock used to be, he sees his own reflection. At that very moment, Anton is in the neighboring room, and when Bell enters and starts searching, we see in the bathroom that the window locks are secured. That means no one could have left the room through a window. Chigur had more than enough time to open the door and simply leave in another direction. But for some reason, he disturbed the tape on his side. Perhaps accidentally, maybe snagged it with the shotgun or the suitcase, or maybe deliberately. That's why, when Ed Tom Bell steps out of the bathroom, the shadow of the tape, which was attached between the columns, has disappeared. And when he sits on the bed thinking, you can only see the part of the tape that's fixed to the left of the entrance. That piece remained exactly in place. Of course, you might say that Chigur should have killed the sheriff. After all, he kills everyone who crosses his path. It's his philosophy. But in reality, Chigur doesn't kill without reason. At the very least, he spared 4 people. The first is the gas station owner. Anton can't stand weak people. The owner angered him with his questions, his behavior, and his selfish marriage to the daughter of the previous gas station owner. A pathetic man, yet there was no need to kill him. Even though he saw the face of the hired killer, the choice was left to fate, to luck, symbolized by the coin toss. And heads was the right choice.
Heads, then.
The second lucky one is the refined, elegant lady at the front desk. In this scene, you can see that neither Anton nor the lady breaks eye contact. She refuses to give him the information he wants, the location of Llewellyn Moss. In the end, he's distracted by the sound of water draining from the toilet and he loses focus, but the lady stands her ground until the very end. Chigur respects her persistence and strength, so he simply walks away. It's a very unusual move. Now imagine for a moment that Sheriff Ed Tom wasn't trying to avoid the consequences, but was doing his job properly. As the investigation required, he would have questioned every witness. That would have included the concierge. She could have told him that a very strange man was looking for Moss. They might even have been able to create a composite sketch of Chigur. After all, you don't see a face like his every day, and the hairstyle makes him unforgettable. The third lucky one, strangely enough, is Carson Wells, the only hired man from the cartel who saw Chigurh's face and lived. It's quite unusual that he even remembered the exact date when it happened.
November 28th last year. I remember dates, names, numbers. I saw him November the 28th.
Most likely, he also won the heads or tails toss. November 26th, Carson's second birthday. Chigurh's decision to let him live was risky, because Wells was the only one who knew Chigurh's face. He could foresee that this knowledge might work against him in the future. In fact, Carson was warned, if he ever encounters Anton again, no matter the circumstances, whether as an enemy or an ally, that meeting would be his last. And the fourth person Chigurh spared? The sheriff himself. Of course, there's also Llewellyn Moss, but in his case, it's more likely that he simply survived by not letting himself be caught off guard during their encounter. The next question is, how and why did Chigur end up in handcuffs? This detail is found only in the novel. The story of his arrest is told by Anton himself to Carson Wells, just before Wells is killed. Chigur had stopped at a roadside cafe to eat. Across from him sat four guys laughing at his haircut. One of them angered the psychopath in particular. As Chigur was about to leave, the guy said something to him. Chigur politely asked him to step out to the parking lot, but there was no fight. In front of his friends, Anton simply strangled the guy with his bare hands. Then he got into his car and drove off. On the way, a police officer stopped him. Because there had been a call, the officer knew the description of the car and the killer. In the novel, it's mentioned that Chigur had practiced pulling his hands out of handcuffs behind his back, but he had never needed this skill until now. He wanted to test himself, challenge himself, see what would happen. For a brief moment, he doubted himself and allowed the possibility of goodness to manifest. But he was quickly disappointed when he saw the officer's arrogance, underestimating the threat of death incarnate. And in the end, the officer paid the price. In fact, Anton solved several problems at once. He eliminated a witness to his crime, the guy at the parking lot, got himself a new car, and bought himself some time. The third question is, how did Chigur realize that the cartel had hired Carson Wells? This became clear at the moment when Anton was in the room where Moss was supposed to be, and Moss ran into 3 Mexicans. Chigur even asks himself this question.
How'd you find that?
He probably didn't expect to run into them there. The Mexicans confronted Moss because they also had a remote control for the signal transmitter, the same one we know was kept in the case. And the only person who could have given them that remote was, of course, the head of the cartel. After Anton killed the Mexicans, they had to realize who they were dealing with to understand Anton's power. The cartel simply underestimated his mental and deductive abilities, and the only person who could match Chigur intellectually was Carson. Plus, he knew Anton personally and had even survived a previous encounter with him. After the shootout with Moss, Chigur tracked Carson for 5 days. He checked every hotel in the area and finally found him. Then he began surveillance. Chigur guessed that Carson might lead him to the money and to Moss. Chigur himself hadn't fully recovered from his leg wound, so he decided to wait and rest a bit. His surveillance revealed that Carson visited the hospital. That's how Anton found out where Moss was. After that, he went to the motel and waited for Carson to return to the room. What happened next, we already know. But Carson's actions remain somewhat unclear. On the way to the motel, Carson knows that Moss must have hidden the money somewhere along the route, probably on the bridge. So he carefully checks everything and finally finds the case. But why doesn't he take the money? That was his biggest mistake. He didn't understand Chigurh's principles. Carson figured that taking the money now would be a bad idea. He wouldn't have a trump card against Anton. And if, God forbid, he actually ran into Chigur, he could still negotiate. But if he had the suitcase full of cash in his hands at that moment, there would be nothing to negotiate. Anton would kill him immediately. So Carson thought it was better to come back for the money at night and then disappear from town quickly. But his plan didn't work. Chigur is a psychopath with strange principles. Principles that are above all the vices of an ordinary man. Carson knew this. Remember what he told Moss at the hospital.
Oh, no, you don't understand. You can't make a deal with him. Might even say he has principles that transcend money or drugs or anything like that.
So his trump card was nothing more than an empty bluff in Chigur's eyes. The last question, what happened to Carla? Why would Chigur kill her? There's no sense in it, at least not for you or for any rational person. But Chigur's principles led him to her. He cannot act otherwise. He made a promise.
You got no cause to hurt me.
No. But I gave my word.
Yet Chigur understands that there's no real need for Carla to die. In this situation, he doesn't blame himself. He blames Llewellyn Moss.
Your husband had the opportunity to save you. Instead, he used you to try to save himself.
Anton is merely the consequence. Every mistake carries its punishment. He even showed a hint of mercy, offering Carla a coin toss. He probably didn't expect the answer she gave.
The coin don't have no say. It's just you.
In the book, during this dialogue with Carla, Chigur says something very important. He must act because he is able to. While goodness sleeps and pretends, closing its eyes, evil can do whatever it wants, simply because it can. In the film, we see the psychopath stepping out of the house and checking his boots. That is the answer. Remember Chigur's attitude toward his footwear. Before killing the 3 Mexicans, Anton removes his boots in his room, not to muffle his steps, but because he doesn't want to soil them with blood. Later, after killing Carson, we see a pool of blood approaching his feet, and he immediately lifts his legs. Anton is meticulous not only with his boots, but also in his craft as a killer. He takes care of himself, his nails are neat, and his hairstyle speaks for itself. That's why this simple gesture, when Chigur checks his boots, means only one thing. Carla is dead. He's not stepping into anything unpleasant by accident. He's precise, controlled, and intentional. The film No Country for Old Men is ambiguous. It's even hard to find the right words to describe it. 4 years ago, an English-language channel called What is Anti-Logic released a video claiming that Anton Chigurh never actually killed anyone. The theory suggests that the killer is just a figment of the sheriff's imagination, that this is how he perceives everything happening around him. In reality, Ed Tom Bell is the one telling the story. Later, the Take channel thoroughly debunked this theory, but many viewers believed that Chigur wasn't real. I think those people simply didn't pay close enough attention to the film. Still, the theory itself is very intriguing. Everyone interprets No Country for Old Men in their own way. I, however, see the main culprit behind it all as the sheriff. He embodies the entire law enforcement system, incapable of dealing with criminals like Chigur. They're used to sipping coffee and waiting for miracles. They live in the past, while the present frightens them. If it weren't for negligent officers like Ed Tom Bell, evil wouldn't have been able to climb so high, unchecked. It's the sheriff's failure that led to Carla and Llewellyn Moss being dead. He didn't want to do his job and constantly avoided responsibility. In such a society, bastards like Chigur are born, who see themselves as God. They do whatever they want and remain unpunished. The last words of Chigur in the novel sum it up perfectly. While goodness sleeps or pretends, closing its eyes, evil can do whatever it wants simply because it can. Bell believes in God, Moss believes only in himself, and Chigur believes he is God. If you're too old to do your job, constantly avoid it and are afraid, and your main task is to protect people from criminals you refuse to understand, then be honest with yourself and step aside. Make way for others, young, ambitious, and most importantly, willing to fight evil rather than just stand by. The only moment when Bell managed to overcome his fear was that scene where he enters the room to check the crime scene. This is the most important part of the film. Ed Tom conquered himself, but by then it was already too late. The Coen brothers repeatedly show us Chigur and his shadow as one entity. He knows exactly what he's doing. For sheriffs, moments like this, shadows, are always blurred and doubled. There are many such details throughout the film. Anton Chigurh is the Reaper of Death. When he sits holding a bottle of milk, perhaps he imagines himself as an ordinary man, just a regular human being. He always does what he thinks is necessary because no one can stop him. Only at the very end of the film, when he gets into a car accident, does he realize that he is just as mortal as anyone else. Sometimes he also needs help, but he doesn't run from his problems and is willing to pay any price, even if it's $100 bill.